Hello, everybody. How are we doing
Hello.
today?
Hey.
Hi. So, for everyone listening, we're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves. I will get started. I'm Camber. I work in the marketing department of Stellar WP, where my primary purpose is working with GiveWP's marketing team. I'm also a nonprofit founder, which my organization works to advance equitable access to name, image, likeness for athletes playing women's sports. And I'm currently looking forward to beating Ben in our March Madness Bracket Challenge. I also have 2 daughters and currently live in South Florida, where it's actually kind of chilly today. Ben, tell us about yourself.
Hey, so my name's Ben Meredith. I am fine with losing a bracket challenge this year to Camber because North Carolina's men's team is not even in the tournament. So all of my dogs have left the fight. I have no will to fight any longer. But no, I'm in South Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina, and I am the head of support for GiveWP and WP Business Reviews within the Stellar WP team. And so, yeah, I focus on fixing it when it breaks. So I get a lot of, I manage the team. I started with GiveWP back in, 2016. So I've been around for a while. And so, yeah, that's day to day. I manage the team that fixes it when we have incompatibilities or things that are hard to figure out or fix. So that's what I do. When I'm not at work, I like to play guitar. I like to, I have a little band, local band. We play out in bars and clubs and shrine clubs and charity events and things like that. So big into music and love to do that.
Ben also actually wrote like our GiveWP theme song. So if you've heard it, he is the mastermind behind that. And then we also have Liz with us today. And Liz is the brains and the hearts behind Quiltlove, which we'll get into a little bit more as we move forward. But prior to launching Quiltlove, Liz worked as a management consultant and in global microfinance, where she focused on group lending to women, which is an effort that relies heavily on social capital and collective action. She's also a graduate of Middlebury College and the UCLA Anderson School of Management, and she currently resides in Northern California with her husband, her 2 sons, a slew of chickens, and a very loyal farm cat. Liz, we're so happy to have you today.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be here. I'm so excited. I'm, tickled that the chickens made the bio and the cat, which actually came with our house. We inherited
it in the contracted everything. You got to keep
yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your farm situation and where you live. That sounds fun.
Yeah, no, it's definitely unique. So we are out in the hills behind Oakland, behind St. Mary's, actually, for basketball fans. We actually butt up to St. Mary's. So we've had a good time watching them. And we're out on a pretty rural parcel. We've got a couple of beehives, and we've got stables and horse ring. And I'm very excited because I'm moving my quilting studio down into the barn next week. So that is going to be a huge milestone for me. And it's just really beautiful. And it's nice to be in kind of this open space, but still proximity to Oakland and San Francisco.
Yeah, very cool. And so the moving into the barn, that'll just give you like more space to do your thing. Is that the plan?
Yeah, it'll be much more workspace, and also the photography takes a lot of space too. So I'll have a whole setup, which will hopefully make the process a little bit more efficient, less rearranging furniture, and more just sort of like a systematic process.
Getting it done.
You know how it goes.
We know how it goes. I do know how it goes. So we're going to get started. Couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions or you just have comments or you want to share something, please do that in the chat. Questions and answers will come towards the end of the conversation, but we will make sure that we get around to those. Just make sure you leave them in the chat so that we can see them. We will also be dropping a handful of links throughout the conversation. So if you want to see more or read more, visit the sites, those will be also available in the chat. The last thing I want to say before we get started is if you have tissues nearby, maybe get them handy. Liz has made me cry every time we've talked, and I am an emotional person, so it could just be me, but just maybe have them nearby if you have them. So the first thing, Liz, that we want to just talk about really quick is more about Quiltlove's mission, right? So your aim is to wrap folks in love and support through your one-of-a-kind quilts. So can you tell us a little bit more about the overall mission of Quiltlove and kind of just a general idea of how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So that's exactly right. So my mission is to wrap people in love from support networks, their support squad, friends, family, relative, neighbors, colleagues, whoever it is that's, the people that you call when something comes up. So I've got a couple of quilts behind me. These are just samples, of course. But the idea is that if you have a life event, or let's just say if your friend has a life event, happy or sad, it could be a new baby, a loss, a difficult diagnosis, you and your friends can come together and give your loved one a quilt. And when you give a quilt, everybody who participates buys squares on an individual basis. And when you buy a square, you have the right to draw or write a picture for your square. And those squares, I print them on white cotton fabric and I sew them all together. So the quilt is a physical representation of your support network, literally patched together, sewn together, and it's something tangible that a loved one can wrap up in, whether they are, isolating at home or in hospital, or wrapping up a new baby.
Yeah,
so it's a great physical way to show your support.
I love that. And so Ben is actually the one who alerted you to me and your organization. And since talking to you so many times, I just think it's such an inspiring story and such an incredible thing that you kind of created. So I'm going to talk about the inspiration behind Quiltlove, which those who are watching or listening may not know the inspiration behind Quiltlove. Perhaps you didn't read the Give story, but it all kind of started with your son's preschool classmate. So in the article that we wrote, we called her Kate just to protect her privacy and that of her family. But let's talk about her story and how that was kind of the first seed that eventually became Quiltlove.
Yeah, that's right. So I have two young boys, and when they were in preschool, one of their classmates at the age of 2 was diagnosed with leukemia. And at the time, all preschool families, it was a tight-knit group, and we were just completely blindsided by this, as of course the family was. And we were thinking of how we could show our support and what we could do. And we were baking cookies and lasagnas and helping with pickups and drop-offs, and people were walking the dogs. And, we were just kind of scrambling, trying to come up with ways to support this family in this just most awful diagnosis. And so I had the idea to make a quilt for their daughter. And so at that point, it was no idea that Quiltlove was going to come in. It was just like an idea of a craft. And so the bunch of kids got together in the park, and they literally drew pictures on fabric at that point, and get well messages. And I sewed it all together. My aunt helped out because we were like, let's just get this done as fast as we can. So the two of us set up our sewing machines, and it had a Peppa Pig theme. And it was just this really special, very pink blanket that Kate took with her to the hospital, and she had it at home. And it was this treasure that, when she got well enough to leave the house, it went everywhere with her, went to Argentina with her. Her mom's from Argentina. And so it was really special. And, but, it was just like something organic that just happened sort of in a moment of crisis.
And did you
fast forward?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think I know where we're going with this. And so, shortly thereafter, a teacher at the school got pregnant. And some of my friends thought, well, what about doing a baby quilt? And so we followed a similar process, but of course this was a lot more happy. And the kids met at a coffee shop, and they were drawing their squares, and I made this really nice baby quilt for the teacher. And through that process, the ideas started coming, and my friends, their wheels were spinning of thinking of, well, this would be really fun at a bridal shower. Or, have you ever thought of doing this when somebody loses a family member or a loved one? And it just sort of became clear to me that there were so many different avenues where you could give a quilt, and it would be sort of special group gift. So, yeah, that's the inspiration.
So you're sitting in the coffee shop, and your friends are kind of spitballing all these different ideas about what they would use a quilt for, or who they would give it to, and that's when you kind of started to think about, like, how could I make this into something beyond just like my friends gathering in a shop and occasionally creating a quilt. So you started to really kind of think about how you turn this passion project into a sustainable business. And something that you've noted in previous conversations with Ben and I is that sometimes it can be really difficult to price handmade items. And that you didn't want them to be cost prohibitive. You wanted people to be able, to make them regardless of the situation or the circumstance or the celebration. And so you eventually landed on like a pay your own way kind of model, which means you're basically like crowdfunding each individual quilt, which is super fascinating to me because crowdfunding in the nonprofit sector is generally thought of as this like one and done kind of event where I'm going to crowdfund this book that I want to publish. And then you don't do anything with it ever again, but you're like pretty much constantly doing it. So tell me how you kind of like landed on that idea of like a pay as you go or pay your own way kind of foundation.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be happy to. So quilts are time consuming to make. And I, like most makers, sort of were struggling to think of, how can I charge a fair price that compensates me for the time that goes into making this product. I use very high quality materials; those have a cost. But I still, it didn't feel right to be charging $500, $600, $700 to a single customer for the price of a blanket. And I wouldn't pay $500 for if my friend was going through something. Like it's too much. But the idea of bringing the group together, if there was a way to distribute that cost, well, okay, then we're getting somewhere. I certainly would pay $25 for a square. And so when I realized that there was a way to sell the squares, crowdfund them or distribute the price, that's when it was kind of like the aha moment that, oh, this could be a sustainable business where I could get paid a fair wage. And, it's an accessible group or it's like an accessible price that will work for hopefully most groups for events, large and small, or occasions. So yeah, I mean, it was the business model for Quiltlove is definitely based on me being able to find a way to support crowdfunding each quilt. On occasion, I'll have somebody who pays outright, and maybe they'll get reimbursed in the back end from their friends. But I wanted there to be a way where you didn't have to ask your friends for money. You could just put the project out there and people who wanted to participate could, and the money was sort of like a non-issue.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than having to like hound people to pay you like on Venmo, like especially in a situation where maybe it's already like, a dire event that we're creating a quilt for. And it's like, I know that you're struggling with your grief, but you didn't Venmo me yet. Like, I don't love that idea. So the ability to just kind of like take the money out of the conversation is super helpful, which leads us to why you're here with us today, which it should come as no surprise to anybody that Liz uses GiveWP to create this like kind of crowdfunding type of payment process. So tell us how you found us. And then we'll kind of dig in a little bit more to like the quilt making process, donation forms and things like that. But let's get into that part.
Yeah. Well, so in my, past life of working as a management consultant, I was working with public safety agencies on software implementations. And I think it's helpful to sort of think or to know. So a lot of my time was spent managing implementations where there was a small budget and high expectations for a custom solution. And so I was constantly having these discussions with teams about how to fit their software, their new shiny software that doesn't quite do what they needed to do to like into a new business process. And I was constantly helping them, think of like, well, maybe if we relabel fields, or maybe if information is presented as an attachment rather than in the body of the text, or maybe we can facilitate through a link, And so my brain was already sort of going down that path of taking an off-the-shelf software and sort of thinking creatively about how it could be sort of massaged to meet the business need. So, that's kind of where I was coming from. And then just to get back to your question. So, the process is, so when somebody buys a square, they're emailed a template, which is just a PDF where they can draw or write on. They submit that to me electronically, and then I print it out and print it on white cotton fabric and sew everything together into a single quilt. do we want to get into sort of how I use Give?
We're going to get into that next. So let's just talk about like the actual quilt making process right now, and then I want to talk about Frankensteining a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So let's say, for example, Kimber, you're going to organize a quilt for a friend who was just diagnosed with breast cancer. So you hop onto my website and you'll browse the palettes, or maybe you'll choose your own colors, and you'll submit. It's a pretty short order form for a quilt. And when you submit your form, I will, review everything, and I put together a project page for your friend. Let's just call her Sarah. So Kimber is now making a quilt for Sarah. And at this point, I'll ask you for your list of email addresses from friends in your group. And you submit those to me. And then through MailChimp, I send out an invitation to your group to participate in this quilt. So at this point,
I'm sorry, there's a fly like right in my face. I'm not trying to. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, is she crying already?
No, not yet, but it's sorry. I didn't want
to. We choreographed this before we started. I was supposed to.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Liz.
That's okay. So, at this point, I'll set up a project page, which is a unique web page for Sarah's quilt. And I'll email your group an invitation to participate in the quilt, which means to go onto the site to buy one or more squares. I send out periodic reminders as the deadline approaches, collect the artwork, and then, as people are buying their squares, they may leave messages in the comment wall or the donor wall. And then as I'll get everything in, do some photoshopping, clean it up, make sure all the images are crisp and fresh, and there's no sort of like smudge marks. And at that point, I print everything on white cotton squares. I sew the quilt in the palette that you've selected, and I mail it for free. No shipping is included, to the recipient with a card that lists the name of everybody who participated. So, it's all right there. And I guess the last step is that I take photos of the quilt and I post those to the original website, to the page. And I distribute this link to everybody who participated so that they can sort of see how the finished product came out and see their square in the context of the larger blanket.
Yeah. So I'm definitely going to want to come back to that last part, because I know I've said multiple times that that's one of my favorite parts about the process, is that people can kind of revisit. But first, let's kind of go back to this, like the form situation, which when we first spoke, you said it was like Frankenstein's together, and you alluded to your background in consulting, where you kind of just had to make things work. And that happens a lot in tech, right? Where unless you're building a custom solution, not everything is going to be perfect for your needs. And so having that background and probably a little bit more of a solution-oriented mindset, you were able to massage or Frankenstein the GiveWP forms to fit your needs. So let's talk about that. Tell us about like the little tweaks and things that you made along the way. And also kind of like, if, I know that there were some snippets and how those kinds of things worked.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, for purchases, all purchases are in $25 increments. A square costs $25. And so instead of making like a $25 donation, the label is one square. So, and then there's hover over text, I believe, that says $25. And so, there's options to buy 1, 2, 3, or 4 squares for the quilt. In addition, for the progress bar, or the goal bar, I think is actually the name of it. I consider it progress because I have a 15 square minimum for each quilt. I need to have at least a critical mass to make the quilt. And fortunately, only in 2 instances since I've launched Quiltlove has a quilt not made it to the finish line. They almost always do. But there is a 15 square minimum. And so I have the goal bar that progresses. But instead of I really don't want to emphasize, how much money we've raised, because it's not a fundraiser. It's more about participation. So I use just a percentage basis that shows as we're meeting the goal, so that people who are following along at home, people who are paid for squares can see how close the quilt is to meeting the goal and, being officially at a go, and they can follow along at home. In addition, I use the donor wall, but instead of thinking of it as a donation wall, I use it in kind of a unique way where participants or supporters, friends and family, can write their messages to the quilt recipient. So, you've got what you're putting on the square, which might be like a drawing of a flower or a favorite animal, or whatever the theme of the quilt may be, pink ribbon. But you can put more text in the comment, which is something that you might write in a card that you don't necessarily want. Like you might do something more of a graphic or an image on the quilt, but you can put text in the donor wall. And so that I'm using as like a comment space to have the collective sort of encouragement and support in text format for the quilt recipient.
Yeah. And something that's really great about using and the donor wall is great in general for this, but something really fun about using it like you do for Quiltlove is that the donor wall serves as like social proof, right? Like you see who else within your group is participating. You're more compelled to leave a note if you see other people leaving notes and messages for the recipient of the blanket. And then the other thing that you do, which is not exactly Frankensteining, but you mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the quilt making process and the ordering process, is that at the end, you leave the page up for the project, but you strip the form off. You do leave the donor wall, and then you put up pictures and things like that so that folks can see the final product that they've contributed towards, but also because people come back to those project pages. So this is the one that makes me cry. So if you're around and you're listening, this is where you need your tissues, FYI. Tell us about the school principal, because that is so special to me. And I think was so, like, you had so much foresight to do what you did by stripping the forms off and leaving it. So let's hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so this was a special case, and in some ways it's just like the most perfect application of Quiltlove. But there was an elementary school principal down in the South Bay who was diagnosed with breast cancer, very young, beloved principal. And so she took a leave from school, and the PTA, along with a group of sort of core supporters, organized the quilt, and everybody purchased squares, through the standard process on their own. It was just like an outpouring of squares. My analytics on my website were like, going crazy. And it was the biggest quilt that I've ever made. It had 90 custom squares or so. And you can see it, maybe we'll link to it. It's all public, but, she ended up passing away, and it was a tragic story. But also, there's sort of this memento of this sort of out of what she meant to her community lives on. And so we've got pictures of the quilt, and we've got all of these comments from students and their parents talking about how much she meant to them. And that's there for her relatives to look at. And I think that's one of the pages on my website that gets the most traffic. And I just know that people are going back to it, reading those comments, looking at the pictures. And I think it's part of the grieving process, of sort of thinking about how much this person meant to them and how special she was, and just reading, that you're not in it alone, and you're grieving alongside other school members. And it's just been this really beautiful space, despite sort of a very sad story.
Yeah. And I think especially as I hear all the time stories about folks who they continue to even text, friends or family members after they have passed, but it's not the same as going and seeing, oh, there's 90 plus other people who participated in this, and they've left, their heartfelt comments here. And I know that I am, kind of its own way of kind of wrapping folks in love by allowing them to come back and see it and know that, other people are still grieving, and it's okay to still feel grief. You can hear my voice getting shaky. It's okay to feel grief.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in too that, something that's cool about this model is that it's totally scalable. And so, when there was this outpouring, the organizer were sort of texting me saying, is there a limit? Are we close to the limit? And it was like, no, we're just going to keep adding rows and columns, and this is going to be as big as you want it to be. And it got big.
Yeah, I mean, that's 90 something squares is really big. When you were making that quilt, this is a little bit off topic, but when you were making that quilt, having that many custom squares, was it something that then you start like the squares, the quilts behind you. I know that they're just examples, but you know, they have squares that are colors and part of that, you know, color story that people select when they initially do the order form. Did you get to a point where you were like, I am going to have to do way less color squares? Or was it like, we're still going to do the same amount of color squares and it just is going to be gigantic?
A little bit of both. Thanks for picking up on that. You've got a design eye. So no, it was a little bit of both. So when they get really big, like I'll never put two custom squares next to each other because I like them to have a little bit of breathing room. So I'll do every other. There'll always be a plain fabric square in between the custom square because I feel like just artistically, it just needs space to sort of breathe and not sort of be so jammed. So I did change the layout a little bit. And I ended up doing more of a pattern, like with the colors. Normally they're just kind of like a scatter shot, which I think looks really cool and organic. But when they're so big, I do tend to do more of a pattern just to sort of bring some sort of order to it, so that it looks aesthetically pleasing in the end.
Yeah, and having it broken up like that, I imagine, makes it a little bit easier to focus on each individual contribution from like from the artwork that they submit, because I feel like otherwise your eyeballs would be like not able to take it all in.
Yeah, overwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure. Ben has finally chimed in.
That's like my first word.
I know. But thankfully, we are at the part of the conversation where Ben actually is the only person that can talk about this.
I actually have a question first. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So the actual quilting part, is that different on every quilt, or is that, like, I know the custom squares are custom, but the actual quilting, you know, I'm looking at the one behind you, like trying to, but it's too small on my screen, so I can't answer my own question. But is that something that is decided on by you, or decided on by the person putting the quilt together, or some combination thereof?
I love that we're actually getting quilt related questions. I'm happy. No, they're all standard. So what I do is a traditional hand tying quilted method. So I do not stitch the ditch or do any long arm quilting. I take embroidery floss, and at every intersection where the 4 squares meet, I thread through all 3 layers and tie a small knot. So those, you can't really see them in these pictures, but they're where the squares meet. Okay. For breast cancer support quilts in October, I'll do pink ties. But no, I mean, I guess they're standard at this point. Okay. And the reason that I use this method is because the quilts all have a very thick Sherpa backing. Okay. They're super, super snuggly. And it would just be too much to run that all through a machine. And so hand quilting works really well, or the hand ties work really well with these more thick, fluffy quilts.
Awesome.
So one of my favorite things was when the 3 of us were having this like initial conversation when Ben introduced us, and Ben knew so much more about quilting than I did. I was like, I have quilts. Like that's about all I know.
I use them.
You know, I snuggle up with the ones my great grandmother made. But Ben even knew it was called batting. And so I was very proud of him.
Thank you. I come from a long line of quilters.
So, Ben, now that we have you with us, you, as I said before, are actually the one who alerted me to Quiltlove and Liz. And for you, it was when Liz actually had reached out because the donor wall was not operating like it should. So she reached out to your support team, and you guys were able to get that fixed for her. And then you were like, Camber, you should look at this. She's got an incredible website, and she's, been able to kind of make this form work for her. And she's using it in a way that we don't normally see. So one of the things was this idea that she'd kind of massaged the form to be like she needed, which is impressive in its own right. But the main reason I wanted to have you here today was because we have something coming that will make form customization more intuitive and more powerful, which is the visual form builder in Give 3.0. So could you tell us a little bit more about what the visual form builder even is for anyone who may not know up until this point?
Sure. Yeah. So the visual form builder has been a really, really long time coming. In terms of one of the things, that we don't like about the experience that a new user or a less technical user even, but even no matter the level of technical expertise somebody has when they come to it, is while you're building this form, you don't see what you're building. You're essentially filling out a form that's creating a form that you don't have any context for what it's going to look like. You don't have any context for where, it's like, do you want the fields above or below the credit card fields? Like, I don't know. I don't even know what that means. Like, like which ones are the credit card fields? And so it's been a long standing point of frustration for us and for everyone else that you can't see it while you're building it. And so we decided years ago now to set out on this journey, really to create the visual form builder. And again, that's the primary goal. Is I want, while I'm putting together, deciding what fields I have on this form, I want to see it happening on the screen right there. And so using Gutenberg, which is the block-based editor for WordPress, we kind of, and I don't want to get too into the technical weeds, but it's really exciting the way we're using Gutenberg, because up until now, Gutenberg has pretty much just been the post editor, and it's new and it's shiny and it's flashy, and it's the development on it is going at like lightning speed in terms of like new stuff is added to it all the time, and there's a ton of developers devoting a ton of energy to that. But what we're doing is kind of complementary to Gutenberg development in building this visual form builder. We're using Gutenberg components, but we're kind of remixing them into our specific use case. And so it makes it really exciting. And so we've added things like design mode, where you can just click on a tab and see the design in the builder right there. Shows you what's going to be on there. And so what excited me about Liz's site is, I mean, it took a ton of work. It's still going to take work to customize your form, but you're going to be able to, with the visual form builder, spend less time doing things like, gosh, I just want to change the wording on that one field to say purchase instead of donate in her case. Like, it's not going to require a PHP snippet. It's not going to require any code knowledge at all to change the wording in the vast majority of cases. I'm sure there might be some things that are hard coded in there that would need to be changed, but those types of things that would require a back and forth with our support team, and our support team was great. In Liz's case, it wasn't me, it was my team, and they were excellent. As I went back and looked through the thing, I was like, man, they just kept helping her out with stuff and giving her snippets and helping her with different things. But it's not going to require that anymore. Not that we don't want to talk to her. We would love for her to email us and just chat, but and answer my quilting questions. But as far as the technical support side of things, I just think it's going to really open stuff up, like custom CSS, for example. Right now, if you want to style a Give form to make it look like something totally unique, it's possible. It's not easy at all. And in fact, we kind of made it hard, because the long backstory there, I'll make it short, but the long backstory is, years ago, if you installed GiveWP on your site and some other plugin or theme messed with inputs, it made it ugly on GiveWP's inputs. And we were like, we don't like that. So we basically got really aggressive with how we coded our stuff so that you couldn't mess with it as third-party person by accident, or on purpose. And so now the feedback that we got was, gosh, I just want to change the size of this, or just, I'm a developer, I know CSS, why can't I do the styling changes? And so the pendulum swung, I just want to be able to customize it. Well, now you're going to be able to do both. It's still protected from the theme styles, but it's really easy, if you know how to do CSS, to just put in your custom CSS. So a third-party developer is going to look at it and go, oh, all I have to do to skin it is add in my custom CSS to this field, and it'll just work, which is awesome. And it's going to pave the way eventually for things like custom designs, that a third-party developer wants to make a custom design. Like if Liz wants a design that says that is Quiltlove branded, easy.
Yeah.
For a developer to do. It's a matter of days instead of a matter of months of development time. And so that's what I'm really, really excited about when I see customers like Liz. It's like, man, she was a trooper. She really stuck it out to customize this form and make it look like she wants to. And it gave us an opportunity to be like, oh, we really do try to listen to our customers and our users and incorporate that into the plans and where we're going with stuff. So 3.0, once it's out, we'll have that visual form builder in it. And I just think it's going to open up the ability for users to do stuff like Liz has done without the pain and heartache that we put Liz through to do it.
It wasn't that bad, but I am persistent.
She said, I am persistent. Yeah. So, I mean, really, you'll be able to do a couple of different things a whole lot easier. And it removes that friction where you got to go back and forth with, which our team is great. But if you don't have to talk to other people, that makes it a lot easier. Ben, I know that we can't disclose a launch date for Give 3.0, but we are making really great progress. So is there anything you can share kind of about just like maybe where we're at in that journey right now?
We're launching it tomorrow. Tell Jason Adams that
the beta.
No, we're not launching anything tomorrow. I just made Jason Adams' heart rate.
I was like, hold on a second.
That was my entire goal there. No, we are. I mean, it is. Anyone who's worked in software knows that promising a date is a good way to lie to people, especially, but we are in the midst of internal beta testing right now. And then the next phase will be, we're launching it as a feature plugin. And what that means is it'll be another separate plugin on the WordPress.org repository or plugin directory where you can go and download it and install it. That's still considered a beta. We're not recommending that people use that on live sites. That should be coming, fingers crossed, next month, the launch onto WordPress.org. And then that's when we'll really start to get a feel for how ready this thing is for prime time. And then I'll be able to tell you a lot better guess of when it's going to be rolled into actual 3.0. But the feature plugin is going to be an opportunity for folks who want to tinker with it and want to play around with it and give us feedback. It's going to be super critical for that. But we're internally testing it right now. Got a few more things that we know we need to add to the experience before we make a feature plugin. Once the feature plugin's out, that's when we're going to be all hands on deck trying to get people to give us feedback. Hey, does this work with your stuff? Use it on a testing site or a staging site and tell us what happens. Did it break stuff? If it broke stuff, how did it break stuff? And we can fix it. The beauty of WordPress is that it is extremely diverse in terms of server architecture and themes and plugins. And there's just no way to know before you launch a product how it's going to land alongside other products. And so that's why we're very careful to test it, and we're calling anybody who wants to help with that. And I think in the chat we'll hopefully get a link to that spot where you can sign up to join the journey, we call it, and be able to be on the email list to know when these things happen. But yeah, that feedback period, hopefully it'll be short. I don't know. It could be, months. It could be weeks. It just depends on how much feedback we get during that time. And we're constantly adding features. So when we launch the feature plugin, we'll still be adding new features to the feature plugin throughout the time that it is a feature plugin before it's rolled into Give 3.0.
Yeah. So just for everybody watching, that link that Ben mentioned about joining the journey, that is the most recent link that was dropped into the chat. You'll see it says next generation donation forms. You can follow along there. There's a little bit of a roadmap. You get emails, information, things like that. So definitely sign up if you're interested. Ben, one question really quick about the feedback loop for once it's available as a feature plugin. Are you also looking for not just feedback on like technically how it worked within WordPress, but also, if Liz were to put it on her site and stick it in staging and say, well, I really wanted this to work a little bit differently. Are you also looking forward to seeing that kind of feedback so that it also informs how we continue to improve upon the visual form builder in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the technical stuff is nice to know, like, code conflicts and things like that. Obviously, we want to fix those.
Mhm.
But also this will, and we expect it to open the door to people going, man, this is cool. I really wish it would do this. And our feedback site is designed to do that. I'm really feedback.givewp.com. And then for the next gen plugin, there's a board specifically for that. But that system's already in place. Like if somebody says, man, I really wish GiveWP would do XYZ, our team, no matter how that request comes in, if it comes in on Facebook or Twitter or through support, WordPress.org, I've gotten DMs on different social platforms. I and my team, we all take that and put it on feedback.givewp.com, and then people can vote on it. And so everything that you see requested there is done. And so whatever it is, we of course evaluate it based on how easy it is to do. If somebody's like, I really wish GiveWP would do this totally different thing that's not at all related to online donations, I'm probably going to be hesitant to do that. Like we're a donation platform. And so, but we weigh that and we take the number of votes into account, and we take the effort that it would take. And our development team really does listen to our support team and our customer success team and incorporates those things. And so, yeah, absolutely. As you're testing out the feature plugin and you think, man, I wish it would do this thing, it's probably not going to out of the gate do that thing that you want it to do. But the more people ask for it and the more the easier it makes people's lives in raising money online, the more we want to do it. Like that's our thing. We say it all the time. Your success with online donations is our number one priority. Like that's, if you can make a case that this makes more money for your organization or your cause or your company, then we want to be about that and make it easier for you to raise that money. So yes, please give us all the feedback.
Excellent. So we're going to make kind of a hard pivot right now, but figuring out how to have the whole conversation, including all the technical stuff, was a whole thing. But I want to hard pivot right back to Liz and her story. And we're going to talk about the commitment that Quiltlove has made to giving back. So even though you use GiveWP, most of our users are charitable organizations and nonprofit organizations, which you're technically not, though you are doing an incredible thing. But you took very seriously the idea of giving back in some way. And you do that now through your partnership with George Marks Children's House. So tell us about that partnership, kind of how it came to be, what the inspiration was between partnering with them, and then why it felt like the right fit.
Sure. And this is my turn to cry. So just for a brief background is my 9-year-old was born extremely premature. He was born nearly 12 weeks early. Wow. And so he spent the first 2 months of life in the NICU. And it kind of was completely out of the blue, and he's fine now. But at that time, it was really shocking and scary and sad. And some hospital volunteers gave our family a blanket. And, it just was this very, very touching moment to get this soft blanket when he was in the NICU, itty bitty baby. And, the NICU was so sterile and scary, and there was lights and sounds, and it just was a tough place to be. And having this soft yellow blanket just made us feel like, okay, there's somebody looking out, like, there's somebody who's been here before. And it just kind of softened the whole space. And it was a very special gift. And that's stayed with me. So it was important to me to have a charitable give back component to Quiltlove. Quiltlove is a business because I want people to be able to give quilts directly to their recipients and not have like a fundraising arm and a grant giving arm. So I am structured as a business, but it was important to me to have a way to give back. So I was, when I was launching Quiltlove, I was looking at children's care facilities, hospitals, different places where I might be able to donate quilts. And I found the George Mark Children's House, and it's a pediatric palliative care center in San Leandro. So it's about half an hour from where I live. And it's a really special place where, they take about 8 to 10 families at a time, and families never pay a dime. And it's all about ensuring that the last months and weeks of a child's life are as comfortable and as colorful and like, I'm going to say joyful, but just like as nice and happy as it can be, given the very terrible circumstances. And I was just immediately touched by the people there and their commitment to, they're bringing in animals, they have water activities. They're just, I'm sort of stumbling right now, but it's just a really high touch facility. And I love that there's no payment is required. And it's also at a scale that fits for Quiltlove. Like I was looking for a place where, for every 10 quilts that I sell, I can donate one. And their size and scale matches where I am right now. So, for every 10 quilts that I sell, I have this sort of evolving, growing, changing scrap basket of pieces of fabric that are too small to be used in a standard quilt. And I sort of pull them out, like dump it on my work table, look for colors that look nice together, and I pull something together. And it's a really sort of an artistic process, and it's very heartfelt because these donated quilts, have little bits and pieces of fabrics from new baby quilts, wedding quilts, cancer quilts, all the support that's gone on for those 10 prior quilts. And so, the family doesn't need to know all that, but they do get a handmade, beautiful quilt that is something that they, I hope, will carry with them after they've lost their child. And so, it's really sad, but it's also really sweet. And it reduces waste. That's fabric that is high quality, beautiful fabric, but it's just too small to go in my standard quilt. And so I'm using my materials in a thoughtful way. And I know that the child life specialists at George Mark really think hard about how and when these quilts are given to families, sort of as they are sort of going through the process at George Mark. So I encourage everybody to look at George Mark. It's a terrific facility, and I think it is the first pediatric palliative care center in the United States.
Just for anyone, the link is in the chat if you want to check out George Mark, which you absolutely should. So Liz, you were talking about the child life specialist and kind of how they determine when and how these blankets go out. Do you know anything more about that process? Because it sounds like maybe you don't. Do you ever get the option to meet families or anything like that? Or is it more of a private kind of thing?
Yeah, it's more private, which is fine. I tend to bring the quilts down in batches. And so the child life specialist will get a batch of them, and they all sort of have different themes and color stories. And I'll usually incorporate some sort of a playful print in addition to my scraps. So maybe it's an animal, or maybe it's a construction vehicle, or maybe it's a mermaid, whatever. Like I'll sort of augment what I've got with something fun to give it a little personality. And so the life specialist can look at, the collection that I've dropped off and make the fit as she sees appropriate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned the quilt or the blanket that your son received when y'all were in the NICU with him. And so while that blanket was made for you and given to you specifically, it didn't maybe necessarily have all the same qualities that your quilts have now, which each quilt serves a very unique purpose, depending on, who they're made for and why they're made. But similar to what we were talking about earlier, every single quilt lets you know that you're not alone,
Yeah.
that several someones are in your corner. Your entire support circle has got your back, and they're either celebrating with you, rooting for you, or grieving with you. These quilts, they serve so many different purposes and can be used in so many different ways. And kind of like we talked about earlier with Kate, who's the inspiration behind Quiltlove, she wouldn't leave the house with that quilt. And these quilts, depending on, the circumstance behind them, they just continue to live on, right? Maybe a new baby quilt becomes a toddler quilt. And then as that person grows, then maybe they get married and they have kids, and then that quilt gets passed on. So you created this just like really phenomenal, like way to just continue to pass on like that big hug.
Yeah.
That a quilt is. So, they live on forever. And I think that's really incredible. So I'm very glad that I got to talk to you a little bit more, and very thankful to Ben for alerting, you to me and Quiltlove to me. And, thank you so much for joining us.
I feel the same way. Thank you so much for giving me a platform to tell the story and also to raise the money too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really an honor.
we are going to have a couple of questions. We're really, really running low on time. So probably only one or two. The first question is actually for Ben, which is about the visual form builder. And they're just asking if there's a future in which you see like a more drag and drop type form being made available, where it's like highly customizable. You can kind of like slide things around versus like the visual form builder that we're making right now.
I mean, it is kind of drag and droppable now. It's as drag and droppable as Gutenberg is. And
okay.
So yes. And it's, I would definitely encourage you to play around with the feature plugin once it comes out, because it's pretty much there. There's a design mode, which is focused on like the what it actually is going to look like, and then there's the form of the builder mode, which is the structure. Here's the fields. I want this field first, and oh no, I need to move it. You can just pick it up and drag it down here and move it to a different spot. And so it's pretty drag and drop right now, and it's pretty amazing. And you can just add new fields, rename the fields, rename the placeholders, rename all of that. If you go to that link about the next generation donation forms, there's 2 town hall meetings on there. Watch the most recent one because that's got the most recently updated version of it, and they actually demo and go through that. And so I unless I understand something different than you do when you say the words drag and drop, I think it's already there. It's already pretty darn drag and drop.
Very good. So Liz, we've got a couple questions for you. One question is about your receipting. So most people that use, like I said, GiveWP, they're sending receipts so that people can claim their gifts on their taxes or whatever. So while the receipts are probably still the same, they're asking if you do anything special or particularly different about the receipts that go out once people purchase their squares.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Thanks for that. So in the receipt is actually a critical piece of the business process, because in your receipt, there's a link to what I call the artwork template, and that is the square that you will print out and draw in. So you get your receipt, it says you've purchased 1 square, and click this link for your instructions on how to create your artwork. That takes you to a page, behind the scenes page, which is just the PDF really. And the PDF also has instructions for like when the deadline is, if we're using a common color palette, or if you're being asked to put a prayer, a drawing of a self-portrait, whatever it may be. So unique, whatever the theme is of that quilt. But yeah, the receipt is a critical part for how I distribute the artwork templates.
Excellent. So they get the receipt and it has the link, and then do they, when they're actually, sorry, this is a me question, when they're actually making the artwork, are they drawing it on a sheet of like on the template that they've printed and then uploading it, or do some people maybe make it in like Photoshop or anything like that?
Yeah, anything. So the standard instructions are to print the template out and to draw right in the box, take a picture of it with your phone and email it back to Quiltlove. But some people don't have access to a printer, or maybe their printer's out of toner or paper. So I always include sort of a footnote that says, don't have access to a printer, feel free to draw on a plain sheet of paper. That's fine too. Anything you can take a picture of works. You can send in a digital photo. You can do your art on Photoshop, Canva, Pixlr, whatever it is of choice. If you can send it to me as a JPEG, I can print it on fabric.
Perfect. The other question is about your progress bar. So their question is about how you set it up, because you said that you need 15 squares. So they're asking, like, once you hit that 15, your progress bar just shows that you've hit your mark, or were you able to make it so that it's like, this is the goal, but there's space so that it doesn't show that it's over?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that I have talked to Ben about. It's something that I struggle with. So right now, when the progress bar, when 15 squares are purchased, it shows that the quilt is fully funded. And so it looks like it's complete. But there's always room to buy more up until the deadline. And so I have text in there on each project page right now that says, like, it's not over till it's over. We're accepting squares. You can participate up until the deadline. But I do wonder if it might be a little misleading to some customers that when the progress bar is complete, that it might appear as though the quilt is done, and it's not. It really just means that I've met the minimum. So that is an area of for improvement. So good listening on someone's part.
The next one is just about how they actually just want to know how you're currently marketing the quilts, and they're asking what social media channels you are most active on.
Thanks for the question. So I recently redid my website, which was sort of what prompted all of this, with a company out of Burlington, Vermont called Bites. And the new website is hopefully going to be SEO friendly. You know, I've got starting a blogging presence where I'm, looking at space, all my occasions. So it's baby, memorial, wedding, cancer diagnosis. So SEO is part of my marketing plan. In addition, I rely on project participants to hopefully then turn into organizers. So maybe you participated in a breast cancer quilt for somebody, and then in 6 months you might want to make a new baby quilt or a wedding quilt, or sort of move from that participant to organizer role. I am on social media. I'm not great about it. I'm not as skilled, but I'm certainly out there. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram. And I might get on TikTok if Kimber can give me some more a good nudge as she's trying to do. So that's on my radar. But I think probably I've had the most success so far is through SEO and trying to get on blogs and get on gift lists.
Okay. Oh, gift list. That's a good one. I like that a lot. And then I have a question, which is more about, and we've talked about this previously, but I just kind of want to bring it up for anyone watching, which is the idea that right now you have, in order to get the quilt made, the organizer submits a list of folks that they want you to reach out to. So we talked previously about maybe even there being a way to say like, well, I want to create a quilt for someone in the community, and I may not know like directly who to reach out to. So if that were the case, if it was like, well, I know my neighbor and she fell and I want to get her a quilt, but I don't know everyone that she knows. Is there a way for folks to can they just share a direct link to the page, or okay?
Yeah, that's what's beautiful about it. There's no accounts, there's no logins. So a project page is behind the scenes and that you can't navigate to it, but it's as simple as sharing that link. And so an organizer could put that link on their, like here we have a La Marinda Families, which is like 3 towns that I live in. So I have a Facebook page. So you could put that link on if you're on Facebook, if you're on Nextdoor, you could put it on Front Porch Forum, any of those sort of neighborhood-based social platforms, you could just put the link out there, and it's available for people to purchase. Usually in the setup process, I always ask the question, is this what I call an open quilt or is it a closed quilt? And if it's an open quilt, I'll include language in the instructions that say, feel free to share this with any supporters, any of Sarah's supporters, encouraging people to help get the word out. Really, the more the merrier.
Yeah. And then the closed quilt is only going out to those folks who they've included.
Yeah. And so I just omit that language in the closed quilts. Yeah, cool. Thanks.
All right. I had another question like spinning in the back of my mind while you were talking, and I've lost it now. So maybe you probably get an email from me in an hour like, I remembered. Is there anything else that you want to share with us about Quiltlove, or what folks can do or go? We've shared a bunch of links to the site and to your story and to George Mark, but just anything else that you want to touch on that maybe we didn't ask about today?
Well, I just think that the final thing, and thank you for so much for the opportunity, is that my vision is that people think of Quiltlove when you're thinking of, somebody that you're going to set up a GoFundMe for, when you're setting up a meal train or take them a meal, some sort of a meal calendar, that you also think of Quiltlove. I hope to be in that space where, it's sort of a trifecta of, somebody's going through something. How can we support them? We're going to raise money. We're going to, bring them food, and we're going to wrap them in our love with a cozy blanket. So thank you.
Of course. Ben, do you have anything to give the people before we say goodbye?
You're not allowed to use the words GoFundMe on our live. I'm not sure if you knew that.
I didn't get that.
Expressly against the rules.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I really do appreciate Liz, you taking the time to do it, and it's just such a cool cause. I'm glad y'all didn't make me talk during any of the like tear jerking parts of this conversation because I wouldn't have made it either. So it's just really special to see what you're doing. And I'm so excited that I mean, it's so cliche when people are like, I want a job that changes the world. And I get to say that like I actually do. Our organization and gets to partner with folks like you that are out there doing this just amazing work. So thanks for letting us share your story, and thank you for doing what you do. And yeah, definitely we'll be in touch if you've got other stuff. And as 3.0 comes out, I'm going to be knocking on your.
Uh-oh. Did he freeze for you too, Liz?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a great segue into saying goodbye to everybody. Thank you all for joining us, even though this is a live stream. Oh, there he is. Maybe.
I'm back.
There he is. Your sentiment was cut a little bit short, but we are saying goodbye. Everybody, just please keep in mind that if you need to revisit this conversation, it will still be on YouTube. It doesn't go away once the live stream is over. You can revisit it at any time, and it will always have the links available to it as well. And definitely don't forget to check out the Quiltlove site, and don't forget to bother Ben with a bunch of questions. So
yes, please.
All right. Thanks, Liz, for joining us so much. And I really appreciate getting these chances to talk to you. So I'm glad you're here. All right, folks. See ya.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.